everyone, and welcome to the assignment tutorial for Sexual Health Skills course. This is actually looking at 3 steps to help you achieve excellence in your course assignments. As you're all attending this course virtually and not actually coming to the university, I thought I might insert this little video clip which I took the other day of the main campus, the Old Royal Naval College in Greenwich, just as it was striking 12 o'clock. You might be wondering why there are 3 steps to achieving excellence for your course assignments. Well, there are 2 that you actually have to do, a reflective learning analysis and an essay. Very much so, the achieving excellence is based on a quote that Clement Stone said quite a few years ago, when he said something like, "Reach for the moon, because even if you fail, you'll fall amongst the stars." And that's what we're aiming for with this course, that you'll go for as high as you can in achieving excellence with your 2 assignments. There are 3 steps to achieving this excellence, and they all revolve around particular questions: why, how, and what. So the very first one, of course, is why should you strive for excellence? The pass mark for the course is 40. So if you turned around and said, well, you're only aiming for 40 and that's all you really want, I'd suggest to you that you're not aiming to do your best, that you should strive for as high as you can get in this. And if you think that maybe the highest you can get is 58, then why not 60? And if you say you can go for 62, why not go higher than that? It's all to do with looking at the various requirements to achieve the different outcomes for your assignments. So why strive for this? Well, certainly give this course your very best indeed. The next question to ask is how can you achieve it? And I'd suggest that there are a few ways here. First of all, you have to read the assignment guidelines very, very clearly. You must do exactly what they say. So, for example, with the reflective learning analysis, it says that there are 8 steps that you need to do. So if you turn around and say that the model of reflection you follow is based on 4 steps, and you only do the 4 steps, then automatically that's going to be a fail, because we're asking you to do 8 steps. So there are 8 steps with the reflective learning analysis, and there are 5 clear sections of the essay. So you need to do those. You also need to do them how they actually get described within the guidelines, and that's the academic indicator terms, very much fitting into the what. What is it that you have to do? So you do both these assignments, and the way in which you do them is to follow every single word of it, because the requirements for you to pass this at level 6 are actually built into the wordage of the assignment guidelines. So if you follow everything, and what I'd suggest is that you try using different colour marker pens. Use one colour marker pen to say exactly what you have to do, and another marker pen to say exactly how you need to do it. For example, with achieving excellence for your reflective learning analysis, you'll see that there are 8 very, very clear steps on how to do this. And if you look at the Word file provided in the course documentation on the Moodle site, not only does it give you the name of the step, but there are also some suggestions underneath on how you can achieve that step to your greatest potential. I'd recommend that you use the title Step 1, Step 2, or even use an abbreviation of the longer title that you can see here, because on the one hand that will remind you to do all 8 steps, and equally it reminds the marker that you have done all of them. You need to put references in with your reflective learning analysis, and you can start putting those in right at the very beginning. So say, for example, when it says with step 1, it's a clear and complete description of the learning events. Now that may be one of the practice visits that you make, or it may be based on some sort of clinical incidents that's possibly happened in your past that you want to think about and to reflect on in more detail. So you choose what it is you're going to be able to write about, but start putting in references as soon as possible. So, for example, if you say that you want to talk about a visit to a local sexual health service which is aiming to reduce the incidence of sexual infections, within your local area, then you can clearly back that up with one of your national guidelines, whichever part of the UK that you're in. The second step is the one that lots of people find difficult. It's actually focusing on your feelings at the time of the incident or the time of the visit. And that really does mean your gut reaction. How did you feel about this? And if you consider those feelings, they're probably a mixed bag and they may fluctuate at different moments, all according to what the visit is about. And I'll give you examples on this later. But also in relation to using references, you might have read an article, for example, on reflective practice, and that article may say how it's really beneficial to listen to our innermost feelings at the time. We'll put that in as a reference. So that would be the first two steps. So the first step, is about the only place where you'll be describing something that's happened. All of the other steps are starting to take you into deeper and deeper levels of analysis. So, for example, with step 3, it asks about other facts which were relevant to the experience. Now, that may be to do with your personal feelings, if you were apprehensive about a visit, or how people have received you on a particular visit. So there are lots of other things that you can say about the step 3 of this. And equally with step 4, what you notice about yourself and others. So look at how other people are reacting to your presence, or how are you reacting to what they're saying, for example. So there are lots of ways in which you can start embellishing this, building deeper and deeper as you go through the levels. With level 5, this is when you take a step backwards and you're now critically reflecting on your particular visit or the learning incident. And then once you've actually done that, consider if there may have been alternatives. So it happened in one particular way, and that's the way you've written about and analysed, but supposing it had happened other ways, did it have to go the way it went, or are there alternatives that may have been possible? Out of that, you can then look at plans for your own practice development. So say, for example, if you notice with your own levels of knowledge, or your attitudes, or your skills, or your habits around this particular type of visit, if you think that there's something that you could build on, or develop, or change, or reflect on further, these are the types of things that you'd write in the step 7, plans for your own practice development. And that also revolves around your own practice area as well. So if you have some new learning that your colleagues would benefit from, then it would be worth you sharing these with them. And as for step 8, how this course contributes to your professional practice, well, just think back over the units of the course and ask yourself which parts of the course has actually informed your thinking on the particular visit or the incident that you're now reflecting on, and where you need to develop more in relation to further knowledge, attitudes, skills, or habits. When it comes to the essay, unlike the RLA, which is in 8 steps, the essay has 5 clear sections, and they very much revolve around the title that you're going to give yourself for this essay throughout the course. And that's why it's crucial that you throw some ideas at us on the course so I can at least help you to choose a really good title. But before we move on to the 5 steps of the essay, I'm going to take you back to the RLA to give you a much more clear example of how to do that. So, with the 8 steps of the RLA, let me give you an example here from a student that undertook the sexual health skills course a few years ago. She went to a service that was providing abortions. Now, she'd never been to such a service before and didn't know what to expect, so she was rather apprehensive. Step 2, feelings at the time, she was rather apprehensive when she was going to this particular service. And the service actually invited her to sit in on a client consultation. And the young woman that she was sitting in on happened to be an 18-year-old who had recently arrived in the UK within the last couple of years, and this young woman was asking for an abortion. And the student on this course, she said for step 2, her feelings at the time, she felt really sorry for the fact that, well, here's an 18-year-old, and isn't it sad that she's turned up now for an abortion? She set this within context of some of the wider reading she'd done on this as well, because 1 in 3 women, by the time they reach the age of 40, for women in the UK, at least 1 in 3 will have had an abortion. So it's quite a popular clinical occurrence, and yet it's one of the areas that's completely shrouded in taboo and stigma. It's something that's not often talked about, and people often hide this away. So the student was really good in reflecting references about this. But she said that the nurse that was actually working with the woman was very skilled and expert in drawing out as much information as she could from the young woman. And within a few minutes, the young woman was saying that this was actually her 4th abortion since the age of 16. So go back to step 2. The student was then saying her feelings completely changed. She said at first she was feeling sorry for this young woman, but once she heard this, she was even starting to feel quite angry, thinking, well, for goodness sake, you're 18, this is your 4th abortion in 2 years, haven't you heard of contraception? So she said that there was a noticeable shift in how she felt, in her guts, in her feelings towards this individual. But then, looking on to the further steps, step 3 and step 4 in particular, she said that the nurse was really skilled at drawing out a lot of information from this individual. And what the young woman then said was that she'd recently come to the UK because she's in a forced marriage, and that she was actually married before she was 16 years old, and her husband is now in his 60s. So there was a huge age difference between them, and her husband was very abusive towards her, and he was desperate to have children. But since coming to the UK, the only thing she'd ever heard about contraception was something called the pill. And she said that if her husband found her with the pill, that he would physically kill her. So taking the pill or another form of contraception that could be found on her wasn't an option. So go back to step 2. The student said at this point she completely changed yet again. So do you see how this reflection through the 8 different steps can take very, very different perspectives? I must tell you that that student actually had 93% for her assignment, and I think that's probably the highest mark I've ever given in my life. Okay, so moving on to the essay. So with the RLA, it's very much built on one of the visits that you make or a critical incident that you want to reflect on. Whereas with the essay, it's entirely up to you what you choose. And that's why I say rather than give you a set list of titles, in which case you may be doing an essay on something you've got very little interest in, now you can get your teeth into something that you really are interested in. So with the essay, choose something that you really feel passionate about. But you have to make sure that it's manageable within this short word count of 2,500 words. There's no point in saying that you want to talk about chlamydia, for example. One nurse did once, one student, she did this in the past, and she actually didn't follow the 5 sections of the essay at all. She wrote as much as she knew, she described as much as she knew about chlamydia in 2,500 words. I could have read that on a sexual infections leaflet or on the side of the cornflakes packet. It was literally description, description, description all the way through, and she didn't actually address what she was meant to with the assignment. So to achieve your best with this, you have to follow these 5 sections. So the first one is to introduce your topic, and that's your title. Now it's really important to play around with the title, so even if you are interested in chlamydia, for example, relate it to your own level of practice. So say if you are a school nurse, and maybe there's a few pupils in your school that actually have chlamydia, so your title may be something like Helping to Reduce Chlamydia in a High School, or the school nurse's role in helping to reduce chlamydia in a comprehensive school. So in that case, it's very much focused on the school nurse's role. So you're not going to be describing all that you know about chlamydia at all, but the school nurse's role in relation to reducing chlamydia within a particular school environment. So it's imperative that you choose a title that you can work with and stick to it really well. So the introduction really introduces your title. So if you were talking about chlamydia from a school nursing perspective, for example, you're not going to tell me all that you know about chlamydia. You're talking about it, you're introducing it from the point of view of the role that you've actually chosen with this. Okay? Now, when it comes to the rationale literally means your reasons why. Why do you want to talk about this? So try to come out with about 4 to 6 good reasons. You might want to present them in bullet points, but then expand each bullet point so that at least you can start putting references in there as well. So you can use references right from the beginning. So even if you say something about the school nurse's role in relation to reducing chlamydia, well, you may have read articles on the school nurse's role in relation to sexual health and something on the reduction of chlamydia. There are 2 references already. When it comes to the rationale, some of the reasons may be personal. It may be that you say, well, I've just taken over a new job and I'm facing brand new challenges that I haven't come across before. That's one good reason. If you say, well, I'm hoping to help reduce the incidence of chlamydia, because that's in relation to the national strategy of whichever part of the UK you're in. Okay, so therefore you can start putting references in to support you as well. Those 2 sections are relatively brief, but the next 2 sections are the main ones, the setting the scene and the implications for practice or implications for your practice. So you may be talking about practice in general, or you may be talking about your particular practice. Right, the setting the scene is literally your review of the literature. So if, for example, you are looking at the role of school nurses in helping reduce sexually transmitted infections, then you need to read articles on the role of the school nurse in relation to sexual health. So that's what you analyse for this setting the scene. You analyse the works that you're reading, you draw out the implications, you look at the articles from different perspectives, interrogating each one both internally and in relation to each other. So say, for example, some of them may be talking about school nurses who find it too embarrassing to talk about sex. Others may talk about school nurses who are experts in promoting sexual well-being. So there you've got 2 very contrasting views. So look at the ways in which you can analyse and compare, contrast all of the different articles you're reading. So this is setting the scene. Pretend to yourself that I know nothing about what you're writing about, and therefore you're painting me a picture. You're setting the scene so that I can completely understand exactly what it is that you're analysing and talking about. Once you've finished that main section, go back to the very beginning and read the whole lot again. Read your introduction, make sure that it's fitting into your title. Look at the reasons why you're talking about it, and also look at what you've said in the analysis in relation to setting the scene. And as you do this, as you go over these 3 sections, keep asking yourselves 2 questions. The first one is, how does this apply to practice? Or how does it apply to my practice? So that's what you want to be aware of. How does it apply to practice? The second thing is, what are the implications for practice? So you may say, let's go back to this example of the school nurse and promoting sexual health to reduce sexual infections. You may say, well, it applies to practice because more school nurses are working with young people who are now sexually active and therefore vulnerable to sexual infections. That's how it applies to practice. What are the implications? Well, if you say you work on a team of school nurses, some of whom are too embarrassed to talk about sex, some who say they know nothing at all about sexual health, well, obviously, in that case, one of the implications is going to be training. Another one is going to be desensitizing people about being too embarrassed. So your implications for practice will actually jump out at you from the sections that you've written above. So keep going over your introduction, rationale, and setting the scene, asking yourselves, how does this apply to practice, and what are the implications for practice? When it comes to the final bit, the conclusion, you could write that in 2 clear sections. One is just a brief summary of the main gist of the whole of your essay. So if somebody said to you, what have you written on in this essay, you could actually read that summary to them, and it encapsulates the whole of your essay. But then use that as a springboard. So you might say, right, well, I've got this far with it. If I was to carry this on, either by implementing it in practice or in further studies, what are the next steps? How is this going to springboard you into what you need next? Okay, that's the 5 clear steps. So when we're looking at the clear steps of achieving excellence for your essay, this is all to do with the what you have to do and the how you're going to do it. Now, when it comes to us as markers actually looking at your work, we have to look at the level 6 grading criteria, and we're not hiding anything from you at all. If you go onto the course Moodle site and look on the right hand side, you'll see that there's a link there for you to check out the level 6 grading criteria. And you'll notice within the grading criteria that there are 6 domains of assessment. That means we'll be assessing your work from 6 different perspectives. The first one is the coverage, and that deals with how much of the topic area you've managed to cover and cover well within these 2,500 words. The next one is actually showing your level of knowledge. Do you just know a little about something, so you're just going to scrape through by telling us just enough to be able to pass? Or do you really know the topic area quite well and you're able to talk about it in a really good manner? And then what sort of evidence are you using to support yourself? If you're going to be using many old texts that you read 10, 15, 20 years ago, which are completely outdated now, then you're not using evidence that's good. You need to be looking at the latest, the most up-to-date, the most rigorous. You can use old texts if they really are classics. So say, for example, if you're talking about stigma theory, and you happen to mention Irving Goffman from the 1960s, that's absolutely fine, because Goffman's a classic name in stigma theory. But what's the latest author saying on stigma theory, and how do they critique Goffman's work, for example? Okay, and that taps in very much to the next section, which is looking at analysis. And the works we're asking you to do are by no ways just a mere description of topics. We're asking you to analyse them. That means taking them apart, looking at them from each of their constituent parts within each article, for example, and then even comparing the constituent parts and the whole of the article, comparing it to others. So especially when you find theories that disagree with each other, or statistics that aren't quite consistent, or any other things that you can find to critique. So critique doesn't mean that you have to be negative. Somebody once said to me, oh, I've read all of these articles and I can't find anything negative to say at all. Critical analysis doesn't mean that you have to be negative. It means an essential analysis, that you are really getting to grips with understanding the insides and the workings of the whole works that you're actually looking at. And then from that, especially, for example, with the implications for practice, you are making judgments. So you're taking all this work apart, you're using good evidence, you're showing you've got knowledge, wide coverage of it, and you're analysing it. And then from that, you're synthesizing, you're drawing out or extrapolating, you're making judgments. And that clearly is level 6 working. So you are making judgments on the analysis you've made. Also, in relation to communication, are you able to get your message across to the marker really well? If, for example, you don't proofread your work and there are loads of errors, maybe, for example, within the referencing, you haven't referenced properly, or your punctuation isn't good, and it makes it very difficult for the marker to understand what you're trying to say, well then, it's no good you knowing all of this stuff if you're unable to communicate it to another. So communication is a key part of the level 6 grading criteria. Now, I'm not going to go through all 6 areas of assessment with you, because you can do that. I urge you all to go into the level 6 grading criteria and actually have a look at what it's saying there for each and every one of the 6 domains of assessment. Okay, if you look at the the 40s, what it takes to pass is 40%. You'll see, like with coverage here, that it's saying, well, the coverage is sufficient. You've done enough to tick the box. You've managed to pass. But look how each of the other areas go up and up and up for each one of them. So from being sufficient, you're now bringing in more detail if it's in the 50s. When you look into the 60s, now you're moving into good quality and depth here because you're looking at substantial coverage. If you're looking at the 70s, then that really is extensive. And to achieve over 80, it's comprehensive. That means you've thought of almost everything that could be in there. You've managed to do it. And one really good way that you can do this with your topic area, you might think, well, look, there's so much to talk about. I can't get it all into 2,500 words. So a really good exercise is to do a mind map or a brainstorming exercise. And you can put that in as an appendix at the back of your work. So you might write your topic within the centre of the page, for example, and then brainstorm out of that, mind map out of that, key ideas. So if, let's go back to that same example of the school nursing role in helping to reduce sexual infections within a comprehensive school. Okay, if that was it. So in the centre of the page, you might write something like school nurse's role in helping promote sexual health or reduce sexual infections. And then out of that, you consider some of the main issues. So it could be providing good, comprehensive sex and relationship education, being able to provide or refer on to condoms and contraception, to be able to deal with teachers and parents in how to improve talking about sexual health. So there are lots of key areas that might be part of this. Then you might even notice that some of those key areas have break-off areas again. And then what you can do is to take a step back from your diagram. So remember, you can use this diagram as an appendix at the back of your work. But you can actually take a step back. And one of my doctoral supervisors used to call this the helicopter view. She'd say, have a look over it from a helicopter view. So look at all the key themes you've written, and you might notice that some of them actually fit together. So as you're looking at all of this, you might realise, oh, a lot of these are actually affected negatively by embarrassment. People don't like talking about it because they're embarrassed. So you might decide that your essay is going to focus on embarrassment or overcoming embarrassment. So you can actually show how comprehensive you're being, show that you've thought of all these different aspects of your topic and put that in as an appendix in the back. And then within the introduction, you can actually say, well, look, there are so many areas covering this topic, see Appendix 1, but for the sake of this short assignment, I'm just going to focus on one particular area, and that area is, and then say what it is. Okay, so look at the difference between sufficient, yeah, you've just achieved enough to pass, or as you work up through the various levels. So look at each of these and maybe even use these words back to us as you're writing your work. So if you think that you have covered all that there is to say on this as much as you can, say somewhere in the text, a comprehensive analysis of the key themes. So you're using those words back at us so we can check out then to see that this is what you're actually aiming for. Okay? Now, I won't go through the other 5 domains, that's up to you to do that, but certainly I'd suggest that what you do is click on the grading criteria on your Moodle site, have a look at each and every one, see what's required in the 40s, but remember what I said about that quote from Clement A. Stone. Reach for the moon. Even if you fall short, you'll land amongst the stars. Okay, now, did you eat a huge bowl of stupid for breakfast? There are bound to be moments where you think, I'm just not getting this. Now, nothing is too stupid. Whatever you feel, if you think that you're banging your head against a brick wall and you're not getting anywhere, please don't consider anything too silly or too inconsequential to mention to me. The best place to do this is in the forum on the course for discussing the assignments forum discussion room. Go into there and say whatever you want, even if you just say, David, look, I'm not understanding this, or I'm just not grasping this at all. Say whatever it is you want to consider. And at this point, my little doggies are running out and they're going to bark. Okay, maybe not. All right, so nothing is too silly to say it. Please feel free to say whatever you want. If there's something you're not understanding, something that's not clear, throw it back at me and get me to look at it and explain it to you in a different way so that you do understand it. Okay? Nothing's too silly to say. And if you do all of these things, then obviously you will be achieving excellence within your assignments. Almost everyone that ever does this course really ends up getting marks that they feel happy with themselves, that they've actually achieved as best they can do. I wish you every success with this and hope that you enjoy doing both of your assignments. Thank you.